So after quite a bit of research, this one tomato keeps coming up over and over again as supposedly one of the best tasting tomatoes out there. So I wanted to grow it this year and see if it truly is one of the best tasting tomatoes. But let's take a look at it here. This is the Japanese Black Trifele, I'm not entirely sure. We speak different languages here on this channel. I make up my own. But this tomato is supposedly absolutely rich and delicious. It is an heirloom tomato that grows like a pear. It's supposed to have really high yields, which if you guys know me, you know I love anything that's got the word prolific attached to it. Well, apparently this is one of those tomatoes, as well as the fact that it is really good for not cracking or staying blemish free, which is also fantastic. I've had a bad batch of cherry tomatoes with cracking this year for sure. So really an interesting tomato to try out. I've already seeded some and I've got some coming up. I'll show you them. And then as they fruit, we'll start talking about them more. Okay, this is the Japanese Trifele Black plant. Doing super well already. I'm happy with them. Not flowering yet. It's a little early, but they are set up and ready to go so that hopefully we'll start to see flowers in not too long. Grew it in August in a zone 8B environment. We're going to talk about that a bit, and then we're going to take a look at the actual fruit itself, and I'll tell you my review of its flavor. Let's get into it. Let's take a look at this tomato plant. It is a nice long plant. This one was grown in a container, but it is an indeterminate plant, which will continue to put out tomatoes as long as it can keep the health of the plant up. And it's a Russian tomato plant, which funny enough, it's named Japanese Trifele. It actually has no relation to Japan whatsoever, according to what I've read. So interesting enough, it is a Russian plant. I love this variety for its cute little fruit. They look like pears. This is an heirloom variety, and you'll notice that it also has a thicker leaf. This is like a potato leaf, they call it. This is a leaf that you might more commonly see on a tomato plant, a bit thinner, not quite as wide as that variety. This is actually one of the first seasons I have grown a second crop successfully, so I'm quite pleased with this. I did it differently. It certainly wasn't as prolific as it would have been in the way I normally do it, but I'll give you a quick look at how these particular plants were grown. So I grew my second season tomatoes in pots in front of the house. I did this so that they could get some afternoon shade and they weren't being belted by the sun for so incredibly long all day. As it is, these guys have been in slightly cooler temperatures and still in a little bit of like light shade, and they're still really super dry in the pots. I have only had to water them once per day. If they were out in pots in the full sun, it would definitely be 2 times a day. And in the garden, for some reason, they get eaten up pretty quick in August. So there's just too much straight sun. So these guys did pretty well. I'm happy with them. I've had handfuls of tomatoes and I've really enjoyed a second set of harvests. Now, despite these guys doing pretty darn good, they still had some disease impacts. You can see here we've got some little bit of yellowing going on. There was a little bit of burning that goes on towards the base of them. So it hasn't been perfect. And a lot of that has to do with fact, I think, is keeping up with the nutritional value in such a small pot. One way I think this could be done differently is by doing a larger Rubbermaid container in the same location. I think actually would have been a lot better. But doing pots, this is what I had. I had lots of little pots, so I used them. And overall, I'm not disappointed. I got tomatoes. The fruit is best harvested with its shoulders still a bit green at the top up here. So this is probably a really good time, probably not a day longer, and it needs to be pulled. I haven't found that the tomatoes get super red. Once you open them up on the inside, they'll be beautiful and red, and some parts even dark and black. But the outside doesn't seem to get overly red. So picking them when they just have that bit of green on the outside is completely normal. Growing them wasn't bad at all. Very typical for growing your tomatoes, ensuring that you have only a higher nitrogen in the beginning and then dropping down to more of a tomato fertilizer with a lower nitrogen a bit later on. I did have to water very frequently every day, and I would do so at the end of the day. And I think that it probably some days probably could have used twice a day, but it survived on the once a day, and that's kind of what I was hoping for by putting them in the shade, and it did just that. However, I do think that health-wise, it might have been a little bit happier on super hot days if I'd given them an extra drink or two. Did not get a lot of cracking like I did with these Romas, so they definitely showed some resistance to cracking. But for me, I didn't have a super prolific crop. Now I say that and I see all these flowers still on there, so maybe there's still quite a bit of hope yet. I really would tell you guys not to take my word for it on that particular subject, because I do believe that this would be quite prolific if it was grown in the right temperature and the perfect conditions. And on a quick note, if you love nature and gardening, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We love having you guys as a part of our community. I love getting your comments and your feedback. I've learned so much from you guys along the way, and I love sharing it with you guys. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Okay, so let's talk about the flavor of this tomato. It kind of has a bit of a flavor like a black crim, if you've ever had that tomato. I didn't find it overly acidic, overly sweet, kind of an in-between. Some say it has a smoky flavor to it. I can kind of get how they say that, but I really don't feel like it has that. Where I think this tomato would absolutely excel is in a sauce. Like, I think this would be absolutely amazing. It's a meaty tomato, but I don't know if its flavor just hit me like, oh wow, this is the best tomato. I didn't get that, but Jolene is not known for that. My taste buds are kind of weak in the taste bud game, but it didn't stand out. These conditions may not have helped it as well. The flavor can be greatly impacted by its growing conditions. That is the same for tea plants, and that's for your vegetables as well. So if your growing conditions aren't right, it may have a very different flavor if grown in the perfect conditions. So if you've tried this tomato, I'm actually really looking forward to your comments to find out if you enjoyed it, if you liked it, if you thought it was a great tasting tomato, or if you're in that meh club and it was just not overly great for you. All right, you guys, that's it for the Japanese Trifele tomato. Let me know your comments down below, and otherwise, be friendly, be kind.